What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Got my evil henchman with me today for some Spiderman previews. It's finally time, and even if you don't give a thwip about Spider-Man, there is some cool stuff in here. So step into my parlor, said the spider to the fly, and let's take a look at 20 plus new cards from the Spidey set, starting, as usual, with the commons. But the good news, this is really only one of these, and it's kind of neat. It's City Pigeon. City Pigeon is but a single white mana for a 1/1 bird with flying. When it leaves the battlefield, create a food token. That's nice, especially considering it's not when it dies. It's just when it leaves the battlefield. So you can bounce this in a Pixie-style deck and get your food token. Not sure if it's 100% worth it. You could play it in birds. Not sure if it's 100% worth it. But altogether, it's a neat design for a card with a decent amount of value packed in. I also like that it's got a hot dog. But let's look at Spider Suit and Costume Closet to start off the uncommons. Costume Closet ain't half bad. But that said, we got to look at Spidey Suit first. This is a single mana for an artifact. It's an equipment that equips for 3. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and is a spider hero in addition to its other types. No reach. You'd think it would give reach, but instead it's +2/+2, which is not terrible, but for equip 3 it is kind of terrible. But I guess there's going to be a lot of spider synergy in this set, so maybe the fact that it turns the creature into a spider is going to matter in some way. Equip 3 though, that's the problem with this. Next is Costume Closet, and this again I'm a little more excited about. 2 mana, 1 and a white for an artifact that enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You can tap it to move a counter from this thing onto a creature you control at sorcery speed. And whenever a modified creature you control leaves the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on this artifact. So again, leaves the battlefield is the text here, and that's interesting, whether it gets exiled or bounced or just killed the old-fashioned way or whatever, like you're going to put a counter on Costume Closet, and I think that's actually really neat. Like blink a guy and you get your counter on this thing. That's cool and all. Don't know how much blinking you're doing in your +1/+1 counter deck, but still, I kind of like it, all things considered. It comes stacked with 2 counters on it. If you put a counter on a creature and that creature dies, no harm, no foul. This thing gets counter back. You can put it on something else. Like, altogether, it's not that awful, especially in +1/+1 counter decks where you can double the number of +1/+1 counters that things get. Like, altogether, it's a neat little piece. I don't think it'll see too much standard play or anything, but I kind of like it. Sometimes you see stuff like this in green, and it's good to see some more +1/+1 counter synergies in white. Well, next, let's look at Vulture, Scheming Scavenger, and Prowler, Clawed Thief. Now, these are both guys from Spider-Man, I guess. I know Vulture, I don't know Prowler, but Vulture over here is 6 whopping mana. That's a lot. 5 and then a Dimir hybrid for a 4/6 legendary human artificer villain. He's got flying, and whenever he attacks, other villains you control also gain flying until end of turn. That's kind of neat in limited specifically. 6 mana for a 4/6 flyer is, it's not the best rate in the world, but you'll still play it some of the time. And, if you give 2 other guys flying whenever this attacks, that's great. That could basically give the entire team flying. So, I don't know. I kind of appreciate it in limited, but it's pretty bad everywhere else. Prowler Clawed Thief is also a Dimir legend. 3 mana, 1 a blue and a black for a 2/3 legendary human rogue villain with menace. Whenever another villain you control enters, Prowler connives. Okay, so, you draw a card and then you discard a card, and if you discard a non-land, this guy gets a +1/+1 counter in case you needed a primer, a refresher on connive. I like that we are seeing this ability a little bit more. It's a cool little ability, but 3 mana, 2/3 menace? Not amazing. not really. If anything, the thing that makes this card is that last line of text, but I'm just not sure how many other villains you control are going to be entering. I guess if you play this on 3, survives till turn 4, you untap, play 2 villains, he connives twice. That seems tempting, but I think there's just so much more you could be doing for 3 mana in standard. So, again, limited specialist here. It looks like the villains deck is shaping up there. Let's keep pushing with the uncommons here and look at Spider-Man India and Rhino Barreling Brute, who I kind of like, but Spider-Man India is cool too. 5 mana, 3 a green and a white for a 4/4 legendary spider human hero with web slinging for 1 a green and a white. I had to be reminded what this did, so I'll remind you too, cordially, that you may cast this spell for 1 a green and a white if you also return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand. This also has an ability called Paviter's Seva. Sorry if I mispronounced that, really, I am. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains flying until end of turn. Again, a card that is all about its second line of text, man. Whenever you cast a creature spell, something gets a +1/+1 counter. Altogether, that's pretty good. The flying is great great gravy too, you know? If you're casting 2-3 creatures in a turn in Commander, let's say, then suddenly you're actually spreading a ton of counters around. Again, if you have those like things that double the amount of +1/+1 counters you put on something, then you're good to go, man. You're riding that train down the tracks. It's not so bad. I like it. And again, the flying will make it to where you get through a lot of combat damage. So fun looking commander here, or piece of the 99 and something. Not sure if it's good enough in standard, but if you're getting it down on turn 3, suddenly it looks a lot better. And you don't have to have attacked with a creature in order to play this. You could always play this because, you know, you crewed a vehicle with a creature, or stationed a spacecraft with a creature, or stationed one of those lands with a creature. And you just throw this down and pop the creature back to your hand. We've already seen that stuff like Nurturing Pixie, right, again with that card, but like Fear of Isolation and cards like it, that returning a creature to your hand is sometimes not so bad. So all things considered, I think it's a nice little card. 3 mana is not much for a 4/4 that'll spread counters around. Now, I'll remind you that I like Rhino Barreling Brute a lot, but I probably won't have as much to say about this card because it's a little more straightforward. This is 7 mana, 3 double red, double green for a 6/7 legendary human villain with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Whenever Rhino attacks, if you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater this turn, draw a card. So, you know, he's got Haste. So the turn he comes down, if he gets to attack, he draws a card. On your 6 power Trample guy, that's not so bad. Again, especially in Limited, I think this will be a fun card to try to ramp into or something. It's just super destructive, kind of on flavor, but all they really told the design team was like, make a big Gruul guy, you know? Okay, I guess we got a bunch of those in the tank, you know? So I think the Vigilance is actually like pretty good on this considering the 7 toughness or whatever, but also the fact that, you know, Trample combos with Haste nicely, or just comes out of nowhere to deal a bunch of damage to your opponent they can't really do anything about, and draws you a card in case they have a removal spell or something. So all things considered, not too bad. And if you have to have another turn with it in play, then, you know, if you cast your Vaultborn Tyrant or something, like if you ramped into something else, then suddenly you get to draw off that too. So I don't know, man. I think he's a cool little Gruul guy, but that's really all it amounts to, is a pretty simple little Gruul dude that there are way better options than in standard, but I like him still. But my favorite uncommon of the day is Daily Bugle Building. This is a land. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can pay 1 mana and tap it to add a mana of any color. But it's also got Smear Campaign. You can pay 1 and tap it, and target legendary creature gains menace until end of turn. You can activate this at sorcery speed only. This is great flavor. This is hilarious flavor when you really think about it. But there is some menace special stuff we know from Morrow's teaser this time around. Sorry I didn't get around to covering it. I apologize for that. But that said, we know from Morrow's teaser there's going to be some stuff that cares about menace in this set, and it's about time. Menace is an underserved ability, all things considered, and this actually might work with certain legendaries because of that menace synergy, but I also like it in Commander. I mean, you know, a legendary guy gains menace can go in basically any Commander deck, so that's kind of why it's my quote-unquote favorite uncommon of the day, is because I think it's probably the most playable common, or uncommon rather, of the day, at least in Commander. Hey y'all, we're in the rares already. Record time, man. We just didn't see too many lower rarity pieces yesterday. Instead, they treated us to 11 rares and mythics, which is a buttload of cards. Scientific term, I'm sorry. It's a lot of cards in layman's terms to get through. So let's go ahead and start. You got to start somewhere. So let's begin today with Behold the Sinister 6. This is 7 freaking mana, 6 and a black for a sorcery. Return up to 6 target creature cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. This might be a hot one for Commander, but I'm not even really convinced that it is there. You know, I guess at least there all your creatures are guaranteed to have different names. In Standard, you might have, you know, a couple of creatures in your graveyard that overlap. You know, I got 2 of this guy, 2 of that guy, and then suddenly, you know, kind of have fewer targets for this. But I think there are some decks in Standard that could pull off playing this, you know, decks with Mold Tender and Llanowar Elves to ramp, but they also have some things that put cards in their yards. Overlord of the Baelmerk, Town Greeter, like there's ways you could pull this off, but I'm just not sure it would really be worth it at the end of the day. Maybe if you had a couple of good ETB triggers. We're looking at a stream card here, but I'm not sure that it's a real Standard card. Looks fun though, and I do like the design. The next is a card I really want to like, but it costs a little bit of mana, man. This is With Great Power. There's an ellipses there too. They finish it in the flavor text, but I feel like you could have just named it With Great Power and not try to get too cute, but that's not my complaint about the card. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for an aura that enchants a creature you control. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each aura and equipment attached to it. All damage that would be dealt to you is dealt to enchanted creature instead. Okay, so you get kind of an Ancestral Mask combined with a Pariah, which is really neat if you have like an indestructible guy, especially if you have an aura that grants indestructibility. Look at that. So now it gets +2/+2 for the aura. And then it also, makes sure you never die until they can exile the guy or bounce the guy or deal with it in some other way. So cool little combo of cards on one card here. But it does cost 4 mana for an aura. So you're really begging to get blown out on this one. It costs way too much mana, I think, to see play in Standard, especially with our distinct lack of like indestructible guys that matter. So I just think it's right out in that format. But in Commander and like Sithis Harvest Hand and Ban enchantments and Naya enchantments and all your Enchantress decks and stuff. It's basically, I think, like a must-play card, to have another copy of Ancestral Mask and other cards like Ancestral Mask is a pretty good big game just by itself. But when you also just randomly get Pariah and you have like 50 ways of putting indestructible on a creature in a deck like, Enchantments Matter, then suddenly this is a wild, like a nasty, just savage little Magic card. So yeah, I think it'll maybe hold a little bit of value just because it's great in those decks, but I don't see it in Standard anytime soon. So let's look at Craven the Hunter next. This is 3 mana, 1 and Golgari, a green and a black, for a 4/3 legendary human warrior villain with trample. Whenever a creature an opponent controls with the greatest power among creatures that player controls dies, draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Cray Cray. So this looks okay because it just says player, and again, that's better in Commander than it is in Standard for sure because there's more players. But, it triggers off of your guys as well as theirs. And I think that's kind of nice. If you happen to have, a 6 power dude, 5 power guy that dies when Craven's in play, then you do get to draw the card. But I guess the problem with it triggering off of your own guys is that it's probably the largest creature you control. And if it's not the largest creature you control when you play it, then it probably will be in just like a turn or two. And then it kind of stops triggering for you. That's kind of lame. But when it comes to everybody else's guys, well, you've got removal spells and stuff like that, so you should just be able to take down their largest man, draw a card, put a counter on Craven, and that's pretty fun in Commander, just in like the 99 of your Golgari deck. Like, it could be your Commander, and you could go drawing a bunch of cards and making them huge, and that's probably a fun deck, but I really think this just goes in the 99 of a lot of Golgari piles that already have a ton of removal anyway, so I just kind of like it generally for Commander, but again, I'm not like convinced about this one in Standard either. Although 4 power for 3 mana with trample is not a bad starting point, and it just gets larger from there and draws you cards, so I could be wrong about this, and it's actually crazy in Standard, especially if you have 4 or 5 mana when you play it, and you can play a 1 or 2 mana removal spell just after it. Well, and suddenly it's going to guarantee draw you a card, and it was basically a 3 mana 5 power dude, so like all things considered, again, this could have some lines in Standard, and just be in your sort of, regular old Golgari deck like we've been seeing for the last couple of years, but it might be okay there and replace like Glissa, which we just lost in the 3-drop slot. So, I'm willing to try it out, but I'll have to be convinced. But next, we'll look at Ultimate Green Goblin. This is 3 mana, 1 and then 2 Rakdos hybrids for a 5/4 legendary goblin villain. At the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card, then create a treasure token. This also has Mayhem for 2 and a Rakdos hybrid. That means you can cast this from your graveyard for its Mayhem cost if you discarded it this turn, and of course, timing rules still apply, so you can't just play a creature during your combat step or whatever. During your end step, you can't do that. So second main or whatever, you can play this. Who cares? But it's pretty easy to discard stuff in Standard right now. We have decks that sort of revolve around it in some ways, Not straight up like Monument to Endurance decks. Those are long gone at this point. But we do have like Marauding Mako decks that want to discard a bunch of cards. So Mayhem could be halfway decent in this environment. I'll say that much. But I don't love having to discard a card every turn. Even though I get a treasure token, that's ramp. That said, it's a 3 mana 5/4, and that's pretty good. We already have, I think it's called Regal Imperiosaur. That's a 3 mana 5/4 in Standard right now. That sees basically no play, so I don't think that stat line is by itself enough to see play. But, let's say I'm playing Reanimator, right? Now it's looking pretty good. I get to discard a big guy to it, and I get a treasure token to help me play big guys later or ramp into like the 5 mana reanimator spell, or maybe I didn't draw my 4th land, so this just helps me play Zombify because it gives me the treasure token. Some really cool stuff about this. And in reanimator, you're going to want to discard it anyway, and you might just be able to play it the same turn you discard it for value. So all things considered, could be pretty decent, but we also saw, I just want to throw this on screen at the same time, Raging Goblinoids. This is the only other Mayhem card we saw today, and it's similar. This is 5 mana, 4 and a red for a 5/4 Goblin Berserker villain with haste, and it has Mayhem for 2 and a red. So in some ways, this looks better. This is the same mana cost effectively, right? 3 mana for a 5/4, but this one has haste. That's actually pretty good if you can engineer like a free discard on turn 3 and then throw down a 5/4 haste. Boy, I think you're doing something with that. So I kind of like a haste 3 mana 5 power guy. But as far as ultimate Green Goblin goes, I think that the real synergy here is again going to be in like reanimator strategies, and it looks pretty decent there. Now let's check out Norman Osborn next. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 legendary human scientist villain that cannot be blocked. It's a great, I've always loved this line of text. It doesn't matter what you put it on. Whenever Norman Osborn deals combat damage to a player, he connives. So again, a connive card. You can also pay 1, a blue, a black, and a red to transform Norman. It's fun to say, transforming Norman. You activate this only at sorcery speed, and you get the Green Goblin. Now, in this set, I want to refresh your memory here. In this set, you can either play the 2 mana version of some of these legends, like in this case, Norman Osborn costs 2 mana. They don't all cost 2 mana, but in this case, you can pay 2 mana for Norman Osborn and then transform him later. Or you can just play the Green Goblin out of your hand for this casting cost, which is always going to be the same as the creature's transform cost. So in this case, 1, a blue, a black, and a red. For a 3/3 legendary goblin human villain with flying and menace, spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast. This also has Goblin Formula. Each non-land card in your graveyard has Mayhem. The Mayhem cost is equal to its mana cost. So you can cast a card from your graveyard for its Mayhem cost if you discarded it this turn while this is in play. So this is not like Yawgmoth's Will or anything like that, but it is still pretty cool, man. Like, one of the issues with this, I think, is that whether you play it for 4 mana or you transform Norman on a turn, it's still a chunk of mana to get it, actually in this form. And so you probably won't have a lot of mana left over to, discard spells and then cast them out of your yard. You might have a couple of mana left over, but, it's not unheard of, but it's probably not going to happen most of the time. I think most of the time you have to untap with the 4 mana version of this in play to really start doing damage with it, just swinging haymakers. But if you can, I imagine some of those haymakers connect, dude. Like, there's so many ways to discard cards in Standard right now that you can probably cook with this just a little bit. And when it comes to Commander, the other format we talk about sometimes here, when it comes to Commander, then like you actually can for sure cook if just in the brewing process when building this thing up. So I kind of really like the idea of having this in the command zone a good bit, because now the whole deck discard cards and the whole deck of stuff you want to play out of your graveyard. So I don't know, dude. I think it's probably really fun to mess around with there, but I think this could actually have a chance in Standard. The 2 mana version of the creature ain't bad, and if you can modify its power in any way, it suddenly gets like really good. But you transform it and it becomes this dude with this incredible ability. He also has flying in minutes for what it's worth, but he has this incredible ability, and for what it's worth, there's also cost reduction on the stuff out of your yard. You could probably go nuts with that. So yeah, dude, kind of a big fan of this. We'll see if it's got any motion in Standard. Again, I have to be convinced about this thing, but it's a pretty powerful line of text. But speaking of these transformed dudes, let's look at Eddie Brock, old Eddie B, ladies and gentlemen. 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/3 legendary human hero villain. When it enters, return a creature card with mana value 1 or less from your yard to the battlefield. You can also transform Eddie by paying 6 mana, 3 and then Jund, a black, a red, and a green. And you do that at sorcery speed. When you do so, you get Venom, Lethal Protector, or just like these other legends, you can just play Venom out of your hand for 6 mana, 3 and Jund. This is a 5/5 legendary human symbiote. Well, no, it's not a human. Excuse me. It's a symbiote hero villain. It's got Menace, Trample, and Haste. So bottom line, 6 mana, 5/5 menace, trample, haste. All right. Whenever he attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw X cards, then you may put a permanent card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, X being the sacrifice creature's mana value. So I guess you just sacrifice whatever Eddie brought back and you draw a card and you put a 1-drop into play. Obviously, the real deal with this is that you want to sack like a 4-drop and draw 4 cards and put another 4-drop into play or something. You know, there's probably some cool stuff you can do with the 6-mana version of this. And it's especially nice that, again, this has like trample and haste, just like Rhino. You can just throw this down for 6 mana. And a 5/5 trample haste is probably something they won't see coming. And if they want to block it, they have to double down on it. So, I don't know, not too shabby, but really, I like Eddie here. I think Eddie's pretty cool. You get a guaranteed 4 mana value off of it. A 3-mana 3/3 is not terrible. And there's probably ways you can game this in Standard to get back like pretty stellar 1-drops, you know, like Stall Inquisitor, something like that, you know. Maybe one of your like Nesting Bot or Infestation Sage kind of guys, you know, like you sacrificed him early, you got the token out of it, you get him back and you can block with it again or sack it again or whatever, you know. There's ways to like bring back pretty decent 1-drops with this, but you know, altogether I think it's a fun little card that has a couple of different modes on it, you know, depending on what you're trying to do in a game and what like phase of the game you're in. So I like Eddie. We're starting to get into the stuff that I like genuinely care for today. So let's take a look at Mysterio, Master of Illusion. Mysterio is like one of my favorite villains in any property, Spider-Man or not. Mysterio is awesome. And quick, just want to let you know here, I was going to start the day with this card, but the more I talked about it and the more I read it, the more I was like, actually, this may be okay. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human villain. When he enters, you get a 3/3 blue illusion villain creature token for each non-token villain you control. Exile those tokens when Mysterio leaves the battlefield. Now, the reason I moved this up like 5 slots from the very beginning of the day is because, first of all, I realized it triggers off of itself. So for 4 mana, you always get 6 power on 2 guys. And that's okay, but, you know, if you can play, say, a villain on turn 2 and a villain on turn 3, well, now he puts like 12 power into play. You won't always do that, and even if you can do that, you won't keep them, but obviously the real line here is to play like a villain on turn 1, a villain on turn 2, 2 villains on turn 3, and then like how much power does this dude actually put into play? It's a freaking lot. And if you have some sort of thing that cares about creatures entering play, something that cares about your total power, or your total number of creatures on the table, then Mysterio looks pretty decent in those situations. If you just want to station up a spacecraft in a hurry, then this will do that because that's a lot of power on the table. Same thing with crewing vehicles, or maybe even getting, you know, one of those lands from Edge of Eternity's online. Suddenly, it's starting to look like you have a ton of power on the table fairly easily, but you know, you won't always get your 1-drop villain. Your opponent will have a removal spell or 2. So even if that does happen, though, again, you get 6 power just off this one dude, like more or less guaranteed. So I don't hate this. I really don't. And I think that he can be blinked pretty well, especially if you've lost a couple of illusions since you've played him. Well, then blink him, and suddenly he might give you more illusions than he did the first time. So yeah, man, I think that this is actually pretty good. Again, the more that I look at it, the more I'm like, no, you're okay. So I'm just not sure like what standard deck this goes in or anything, but there's plenty of uses for a card like this for sure. But here's another guy I like. This is Sandman, Shifting Scoundrel, 3 mana, 1 and 2 green for a star legendary sand elemental villain. Sandman's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. Sandman can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Nice. And if you pay 5 mana, 3 and 2 green, you return this card and target land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Cool thing about this is that it doesn't get like a finality counter or anything like that. So, you know, you pay your 5 mana, bring it back, and I believe you can do that at any time. Yeah, it doesn't say like cast it from your yard. You just do this like your opponent's combat step or something. Well, I guess, yeah, it comes back tapped, but whatever. You do it at the end of your opponent's turn or something like that. And now you've just like always got access to a 5/5 or 7/7, or it depends on how late you are in the game, right? So I kind of like this as maybe even a control finisher or something that you discard earlier in the game or something like that. And then later in the game, in Bant or something, you just get it back EOT and you got a 6/6 that can attack and you got to ramp off of it. That ain't bad, man. And if your opponent does have removal for it, like a Shoot the Sheriff or something, just get it out of your yard again. Like, who cares? You can get this out of your yard in perpetuity along with another land. And if you have like Fable Passage in your deck, just keep getting back the same Fable Passage or something. Like, That's all pretty sick, man. This card looks actually really good. And if you just play it on turn 3, it's a 3/3, which doesn't sound great, but scales throughout the entire game. Pretty good in the landfall decks, pretty good in the ramp decks, obviously, as long as you're lamping? So long as you're ramping lands. But, you know, I think this is actually one of the strongest cards of the day, period. I can't say I love the lack of a real keyword ability. You know, trample would have gone a long way on this, obviously, but, you know, it can't be chump blocks, and it can't be blocked by, like, fountain pour tokens and stuff, so that helps a little bit. Just, again, altogether strong card in this case, but we'll move on to the Clone Saga, a weird one that I nonetheless think is pretty decent, man. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a Saga. You surveil 3 on Chapter 1. On Chapter 2, when you next cast a creature spell this turn, copy it, except the copy isn't legendary. On Chapter 3, you choose a card name. Whenever a creature with the chosen name deals combat damage to a player this turn, draw a card. So it's supposed to draw you 2 cards on the next turn. Is fun. But obviously the money mode on this one is Chapter 2, and you can copy legends without them being the legends. A doop. That's pretty good for Commander. Everyone loves like a spark double kind of ability, and this is kind of a spark double that takes a turn. Now, just for the record, it's terrible that it takes a turn. I think that really hurts the playability of the card, but, you know, Commander players eat stuff like this up. Now that there's basically another copy of Spark Double, you just get to copy your Commander again, and that leads to all kinds of broken stuff, so I gotta give this card some respect, if only for that format, but I don't know. It's another streamer card in Standard, where if you can do something broken enough with it, then maybe it jumps into, like, MTGO League 5.0s, but I just don't really see this at the top tables in Standard, but it's one of those things where I kind of hope I'm wrong. You know, this could end up being an annoying card, but a strong one too. So we'll just see what it ends up doing in Standard, but I'm not sure it does much. Commander seems like the format for this. But we are down to my 2 favorite cards of the day, everybody, and one is Gwen. Remorseless. I did not know that there was like a Gwen Stacy Venom mashup, and it's called Gwen. I love that. Just right out of the box, I love that. But once you see the text box on it, get a load of this text box, ladies and gentlemen. It's crazy. 5 mana, 3 and double black for a 4/4 legendary symbiote spider hero with death touch and lifelink. So a 5 mana 4/4 DT lifelink. Okay. Whenever Gwen attacks until end of turn, you may, stop me if you've heard this one, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play cards from the top of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. So it's a Bolus of Citadel. It's just whenever it attacks, you give Bolus of Citadel for the rest of the turn. That's insane. That's so good. Like, I don't think this is playable in Standard. I think there's probably stronger 5 mana creatures in black, like right now. You know, like Zodiark's good, Aklazot's is good. These don't really see play. Mostly the 5 mana black creature that does see play is Unholy Annex. It gives you the 6/6 flying demon token or whatever. So we don't see a whole lot of 5s in black decks, and they're probably stronger ones, but in Commander, boy, ooh, son, you get another Bolus of Citadel? Son, daughter, chill, you get a second one. It's not as good as regular old Citadel. It's easier to take out. You usually have to wait a full turn to use the ability. Thank God you don't have to hit for combat damage. It's just an attacks trigger. You might only get the trigger one time, right? You don't get to just do it whenever you want to. So there's like a lot of things that make this worse, I think, altogether than a Bolus of Citadel, but it's still, you know how strong that card is, right? And like, I think any version of it is pretty cool, especially when it not only comes on a 4/4 lifelink death touch thing, but it's as cool as this. What a cool card this is, all things considered. I keep saying that phrase, but that's because you have to consider all things. And when you've done so with this card, I don't know how you don't like it. You know what I mean? Even the biggest Spider-Man Universes Beyond cynic in the world could look at this, I think, and be like, okay, so that's cool. I hate it. On some level, I hate it, but I have to admit that it's cool. Okay, but final card of the day, and kind of the one that I think is the most Standard playable, and also, I'm sorry, but it is Commander playable. You know, I know how much you guys hate the C word. It is what it is. This is Electro Assaulting Battery. Do you see what they did with the names? Adorable. 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for a 2/3 legendary human villain with flying. You don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, add a red mana. Nasty. When Electro leaves the battlefield, you may pay X. When you do, he deals X damage to target player. Okay, so It's not Burgy, but it is a Burgy style ability on a 3-mana creature, and it goes great in like spell slinging decks. Like not just Izzet decks, but we just covered like Black Waltz number 3 for the channel. Nobody watched that deck tech. It's not a deck tech. It's like 100 cards for Black Waltz number 3. Check that video out. I worked really hard on it. But anyway, it goes well in that deck and anything that's throwing instants and sorceries around and mage crafting and stuff like that. So excellent commander card, but it's good for that reason in standard too. You know, it's no Vivi. It's probably not making as much mana as Vivi or anything, but it's still making a lot of mana. If you go like Opt, Sleight of Hand, other spell, then you've made 3 mana with this guy all in one turn, and that's pretty good. Just basically anytime you see this kind of mana production, you got to pop for that. But there's also the fact that soon we'll be getting the Avatar set, and looking forward to that set. We have Firebending. In case you're not familiar with that, this is on creatures, red creatures for the most part, and it says that whenever a creature with Firebending X attacks, you're going to add that much red mana to your pool. But obviously you lose that mana at the end of your combat step. Now in this case, you won't lose that mana at the end of your combat step from your firebending creatures, and that could end up being kind of important. So just remember that line exists in a couple of months. And I guess last thing about this, again, it's no Vivi. I think that much is evident, but it banks the mana that Vivi gives you, and that might go kind of nice with the little guy from Final Fantasy. And I guess if Vivi gets banned in November, the next ban announcement, then this dude suddenly becomes a lot better. But I don't think they'll pull the trigger on that. They'll probably just ban Soul Cauldron, keep Vivi in the format. We probably keep complaining because Vivi's just a busted card. They need to admit it. But either way, if Vivi ever does leave the format for whatever reason, ahead of its time, well, then suddenly I think that this becomes like not necessarily a replacement, but it just becomes better because now you have a 3-drop that makes mana that isn't quite as busted, but is still good. Actually, there is one more card to look at today. It's Carnage Crimson Chaos. This wasn't on Mythic Spoiler, but it is on MTG Previews. This is 4 mana, 2 a black and a red for a 4/3 legendary symbiote villain with trample. When it enters, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your yard to the battlefield. It gains, this creature attacks each combat if able, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, sacrifice it. You can Mayhem Carnage in for just a black and a red. Almost missed this guy, which would have been a tragedy because, first of all, I really like Carnage. I will always be 10 years old somewhere in my heart, so I like Carnage and I like Venom. Those are my favorite guys. They're cool, but aside from that, it's an awesome magic card, too, There's lines with this. If you can discard a 3 mana or less guy on turn 2, and then on turn 3, engineer a 1 mana way to discard Carnage, pay the extra 2 mana you've got, hopefully, by then. And then you get Carnage and whatever guy you discarded on turn 3 or on turn 2. So that is a full 7 mana value on turn 3, and that seems outrageous. Like if you can actually pull it off, you'll have a 4-power trampling dude on turn 3, along with a 3-power or a 3 mana creature. Yep, one more. Go. Almost missed this guy, which would have been a tragedy because, first of all, I really like Carnage. I'm always going to be 10 years old somewhere in my heart. And so Carnage and Venom are like my favorite guys. They're cool, but apart from that, it's a really good magic card too. I really think that there's lines with this, man. If you can discard a 3-mana creature on turn 2, and then on turn 3 find a way for just 1 mana to discard Carnage, and there's ways to do it in Standard, well then now you have 7 full mana value available to you on turn 3, which is kind of outrageous, especially with all the stuff that discards in this environment. You already said that with the ultimate Green Goblin when we talked about that, but there's just so much stuff that not only discards in this environment, like profits off discards too. You got your Marauding Mako in play. That probably goes pretty nice in your Carnage decks. I don't know. I could see something shaping up in Standard if there's enough cool stuff to do, and I think there's more than enough cool stuff to do. Even if you're paying the full 4 mana for it, like, okay, it's still fine. Even at 4 mana, it's good, so imagine it at 2 mana is all I'm saying. But anyway, y'all, that is it for the Spider-Man stuff for today. I'll be back on Monday with more Spider-Man things, and it looks like the previous season's only going to last till like September 4th this time around. Maybe September 5th is going to be the common dump, so just join me this week for spoiler season. If you're not subbed yet, now would be a good time to get all that content. If you didn't like the video yet, now would be a good time to do that because it's slow effort and it helps me out. Puts the video in more recommended feeds, which I think I'll need this time around. I have a theory that fewer people are going to care about Spider-Man previous season than other previous seasons. We'll see if that bears out, but I would like some likes to other people see that this video exists. That might help it out. Anyway, I also have a Patreon. If you want to vote on what decks we do during Spider-Man Standard, you can do that for just $1 a month. That's all it requires. You get some inside look at some of the content. You get to see all the Patreon posts that I write. I spend a lot of time writing long, gorgeous, flowing Patreon prose. So get in there. All it costs is $1 a month for access to this content and the ability to vote on things. But anyway, I'm done pitching for this one. I'll see you guys later. Just let me know how you felt about all this in the comments section. Any mistakes I made, don't have to tell you to tell me about those. But any interactions that I missed, combos you're excited about, and stuff like that with these new cards. I read your comments. I'm always into that stuff. But anyway, y'all, I guess that's Itski, Lewitsky, and Allski Kowalski. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.